Ben's wife owns this Amazon, and they have a mind to try a little bit of historic road rally. And so they've come to us just to get it lightly ready for a little bit of competition. Now, the first thing we're going to do is protect both the sump and the steering from impact damage at the front. None of us plan to have an off when we're rallying, but it does happen. And if you hit a log or a stump, the first thing that's going to wipe out is your steering and put you out of the event. However, our 8mm 6082 aluminium steering guard that we've developed over the 20 years that we've been putting cars on the Peking to Paris and the London to Cape Town rallies, and this is the one that works, all pre-formed and manufactured by us for us. So that's the steering guard, and then behind that we have the sump guard there with a nice hole so that you can get at your oil change, and it does protect the gearbox, although that's not really relevant. It's mainly to pick up on the gearbox cross member at the back just for mounting. So that's what we're going to fit this afternoon. Let's go and have a look under the car. Okay, so the process is, first of all, to offer up the sump guard, which picks up on the gearbox cross member there, and we'll then have two bolts coming through here. And what I'm going to do is just drill through two pilot holes in the back of the sump guard, then clamp it up and drill the two pilots here before then bolting it and continuing to the steering guard. I'll be back in just a moment. So there's my two 3.5mm pilot holes in the aft end of the sump guard, and now we're going to offer it up. I've centered it on the drain plug here. There you go, centered on the oil sump drain plug. Just tap it to make sure we're hard up against the cross member, and our 3.5mm drill to give us the pilots. And now we'll take it away and I have two marks here. So now, having got my two pilot marks, I'm just going to drill through the gearbox cross member. And the other side. And now we'll take it out to 8mm. So that's my pilot holes now drilled out to M8 holes. These are 100mm apart. And now with my 8mm drill, we'll take the cross member holes out. And we'll offer up At this stage, I'm just going to use a pair of plain nuts on the end of these bolts. There we go. Just knock that central again, and now we're going to turn our attention to the steering guard. Okay, now we're going to offer up the steering guard. Now the front lip of it goes on the bottom of the radiator cross member, and the aft comes here, finishing about the back of the engine cross member. There we go. Just make sure everything's centered on the back here. It's nicely married up exactly with the sump guard. And we just have a quick check at the front here. That all looks nice. The only thing you need to do now is just move it slightly forward, so you've got about 5, maybe 10 mil clear on the anti-roll bar, because at the moment the back edge of the steering guard is touching the anti-roll bar. If we move it 5 or 10 mil forward, it's completely clear of the anti-roll bar. On that topic, of course, we happen to delete our anti-roll bar whenever we're rallying. The anti-roll bar is excellent if you're on smooth, dry roads. Anything else, it's actually detracting from your car's performance. So if you're expecting mud, snow, ice, rain, or a rough surface, like a Suffolk country road, then you do not want your anti-roll bar. If you want to look into more of that theory, then just look up what the Formula Ford guys do when they're out on circuit with an anti-roll bar, and that will give you a good idea of how to think when choosing whether to run with an ARB or not. But anyway, we're going to assume the ARB will be here, so we're going to move it 5 mil forward. I'm just going to mark a datum on the back, my trusty marker pen, so I can see when I've got 5 mil. And here we go. Good, that is excellent now. And then I'm going to use mole grips to secure the front lip of my steering guard onto the bottom of the radiator cross member. There we go. Now we're going to drill pilot holes. Okay, we're going to secure this with 3 bolts. So let's just measure across, 1 in the center, so 38 divided by 2 is 19. There's my center mark, and then I'm going to have a pair at 5 centimeters in from the outboard edge. You do wonder why I didn't do this on the bench rather than upside down. And then we want it so that when we drill through, we want to be pretty much dead center of the radiator cross member. So I'm just going to mark my inline distance. There we go. And I shall drill my first mark straight through into the cross member. And just to make sure this doesn't creep, I'm going to pop in a 3.5mm rivet there just to stop it moving, and we'll go to the outboard mark. And the other outboard mark. There we go, that's our pilot holes. Now I'm going to take this away to the bench and I shall draw my pilots out to 8mm, and then we'll come back and turn our attention to putting the riv nuts into the bottom of the radiator cross member. There's my 3 M8 holes to secure the front of the steering guard. We'll now turn our attention to fixing the riv nuts into the bottom of the radiator cross member. Now, those of you who know riv nuts will say, oh, isn't that a bit dodgy using riv nuts in such a high pressure area? Well, of course, if you hit an impact, the force will be thrusting the steering guard upwards. So in fact, all your riv nuts are doing are just trying to gently locate this. If in fact you do hit something very much head on, then it's in shear mode. And whether they're riv nuts or anything else, it's still just going to try and shear the bolts, nothing else. There is no real force trying to pull the riv nuts down and through. So I'm happy using riv nuts in this case, but if you're not, then it's simply a matter of welding a captive nut onto a plate and then welding the plate into the bottom of the cross member, which is the other way of doing it. Okay, so here is my riv nut. It's 10.5mm in diameter. Let's take all these 3 holes out to 10.5mm. And then I just like to go through with just lightly with a countersink. There we go, lovely smooth surface. And we pop the riv nut onto the gun, wiggle it into the interference fit, and carefully compress it up. There's one. Two. And final riv nut. And now we can offer up the steering guard. I have my 3 M8 bolts ready to go. Put the first one in. Then just support the back end. Align it. good. In goes the second. Okay, I'm just going to hold this by hand for a moment, just whilst we hand do up those 3 M8s. There we go, just in finger tight, and it's holding it all nicely in position. And this again, it's we do have some customers come and look at my design and make quick sketches and go away, and they tend not to get the angles right when they go and do it, so it costs them more money. It doesn't fit like this does perfectly. So although you possibly could save yourself 10 or 20 quid by not buying it from us, it'll certainly take you a lot longer and not be as nice a job. So I suggest you buy your Sump and steering guards from me, because after 20 years of doing Peking to Paris and London to Cape Town, where we have proven our design rather beautifully, plus 20 years of doing UK events like Rally of the Tests, Land's End to John O'Groats, and of course all the HRCR series, we kind of know they work, and that's worth some money. Okie doke, let's progress. So we've got the back located, we've got the front located. Just knock the sump into line so everything's centered. There we go. And what we're now going to do is basically place 2 bolts through here. Now you've got a choice. Now this car's just doing national events, so what we're going to do is simply drill through at close to the leading edge of the cross member here and pick up on the lip and put a nut and bolt, securing the nut on top of the lip here. If we were building a P2P or a London to Cape Town car, then we would drill our pilots in the center of the cross member here and weld in a pair of captive nuts on a plate to take up on that. As I say, we're going to go for a nut and bolt on the front edge, which is of course the most convenient way to go about it, and then none of this needs welding. So we'll mark it up, ready for that. So firstly, we mark where the edge is compared to our steering guard. So using my square, I line it back and mark it on the edge. There it is, that's our line. There. And likewise on the starboard side of the car. And then just to help your visualization, let's draw the line on the sump guard. And that also gives you a chance then just to make sure you've done nothing daft as you sight up on your steel rule to the leading edge of the cross member. So there we go. That is the leading edge of the cross member, so they've got to be, our holes have to be that side of it. Now, how thick is that lip that we're going to work with? So there we go, and it's 20 mil. We've got a 20 mil lip to play with there. Okay, and whilst we're here, we're just going to mark the centre line. Okay, we've got 260 across there, so my centre line is at 130. Now, 20 mil there, so I suggest that we place the pilot holes 8 mil back. And that should be plenty with our M8 bolts. So if I mark 8mm there, there, and that is the centre line of our bolt holes. And our sump guard wants to be included within these bolt holes. So our sump guard is 190 wide. So if we put those 20mm in, then that is 150mm centre to centre. So if I mark .75 and 150, and just extend that down to my centre line of the bolts. Those are my 2 pilot holes. And once again, just to make sure you haven't confused yourself, just eyeball it, this line up to your cross member, and make sure it is going to work. That looks particularly good. That looks a bit narrow this side, so I'm actually going to drill slightly about 1mm aft of that line. Okay, let's go and get me pilot drill. And away we go. So this one I was happy with, so we're going to go straight for the mark. And this one I'm going to take 1mm aft. And there we go. So now we de-rig both units to drill the M8 hole through the steering and the sump and countersink the steering guard, and to open out the cross member holes to M8, and then that's final assembly after that. So let's take it apart. Incidentally, if any of you have a Porsche 924 out there, I've done exactly the same thing for a Porsche 924, but I doubt it'll fit the 924S. So let us know if you need a Porsche 924 sump guard. And off with the rear fittings. Right, so having opened out the holes on my sump and steering guard, I'll be back. Okay, so we just drill out the cross member to the M8. There we go. And we can do the final assembly. So at the rear, I've got a couple of plain bolts, 25mm M8 by 25. And I'm just going to put on loosely my pair of washers and M8 nylocks. That's the port side done, and the starboard side. Good, there we go. And we shift our attention to the steering guard, and that's a set of 3 M8 by 20mm plus a washer. That's the second one in. And the third one in. And finally, we have our pair of M8 by 40 countersunk, because of course this is going to get scraped in natural rallying, so you don't want a bolt to be proud of here. You want countersunks, and hence the countersunk holes. I'm just going to put some copper slip on those. There we go. And we pop his washer on. There it goes. M8 nylock. There we go. Washer. Nylock. And we're going to start by tightening the centre bolts. So on with our combination spanner. That one on. Good, just check the port side again. Yeah, that's lovely. Look at that, that's good. And we switch our attention to the aft end. That's good. And finally, the 3 steering guard front ends. 1, 2, 3. That is how to install a sump and steering guard neatly. Now the fitting method for both the 140 and the PV544 sump and steering guards are all subtly different, but fundamentally the same technique. So all the series of sump and steering guards are available from us in 8mm 6082 aluminium. As you can see, the job is really easy when you've got it all perfectly fabricated for you already. I'm guessing it would take you at least 3 or 4 times as long if you tried manufacturing it yourself from scratch. That's the benefit of our experience. Good stuff. Thank you.